Well, well, what has the cat dragged in today? It's a video tutorial on setting up your test environment. So this is a continuation of our stealth action game tutorial sequence. And the thing that I want to focus on getting set up this time around is our test environment. Well, once you start getting into more complex game creation, you're going to want to have test scenes set up that enable you to very quickly and easily test out functionality and logic in your game. And you do need to apply a little bit of thought here to make sure that it's set up so that you can, in fact, quickly test everything that you need to test. So let's go ahead and get that set up. To start things off with, I'm going to create a new scene, which I will immediately name, or save, I should say, into my scenes folder here. And I shall call it test level. Now I'm going to need some kind of a floor for everyone to stand and walk on. And I could use just a regular old cube and stretch it out. But I do want to start taking a look at the Polygon Starter Kit. This is something I very commonly do when I'm working with a new asset package, is I'll dig into it and I will use it to build a test environment, because the knowledge I gained from that helps inform me on how to build the actual level environments. So I'm going to go into Prefabs. It sounds like an excellent place to start. And there's not much sorting going on here, which is fine because there's not that much here to sort through. And I'm looking for anything that says like a ground or floor or something like that. Now I want actual tiles. So this ground stuff here, while that might work fine for prototyping out a more naturalistic terrain environment, there we go, as soon as I get off of renaming that, these little clumps of ground aren't really what I'm looking for. Ground flat might work, but not a fan. Looking through here, what else do I have? I have mountains, rocks, trees, prototype buildings, floor. I've got a 5x5 and a 1x1. Well, I certainly don't want to deal with trying to build things out, I'm assuming, in a 1 meter by 1 meter tile increment. So I am going to go with the building's floor 5x5. Drag that into my hierarchy. There we go. Get a nice little tile. And I can see indeed from my grid settings that that is a 5x5 tile. Now, I'm going to need more than just one tile. I'm actually going to build up a 3x3 grid of these. So a couple of ways I could approach this. I could keep dragging these in and moving them around, but that's a little bit inefficient. Control D is a shortcut for duplicate, and it will, shockingly, duplicate an item. But attempting to place this just normally like this, I'm either going to have it slightly overlapping, which is not good, or I'm going to have a slight gap, which is also probably not really all that good either. I could come in and manually set the distance on all of my pieces, but again, that's more fiddling than I really want to deal with. Within Unity, built into it, there is a snapping feature. Now, it's a relative snap, not an absolute snap. What do I mean by that? When you use the snapping feature in Unity, it snaps relative to your starting point. So if I have some weird value on my original transform position and I start using the built-in Unity snap, it will snap to certain fixed increments, but it will be relative to this weird starting point. So that is something to keep in mind. This is very different than, say, from something like ProGrids, which actually snap things to an absolute grid. Now, to get to the Unity snap settings, I need to go to Edit and Grid and Snap Settings. It can be useful when you know that you are going to be dealing with a bunch of snapping to leave this window visible. And as you can see here, if I look down, this is also, by the way, where you can change your grid size. So if I want to change this to a 5x5 world grid, yes, it has been changed, but I'm just going to leave that as a 1x1. More importantly, increment snap. It's currently set to 0.25, which is kind of tiny. I know these are 5-meter sized tiles. And personal preference, I like keeping my snap setting to half of what my actual size is, just in case I want to have something slightly offset. So now what I can do, so I'm going to get rid of that little test piece there, is I can Control D for duplicate that piece, and then Control drag on the move widget. This will snap, making it very easy. Oops, and I think I just Yep, I did. There we go. Very easy to quickly create this out. And like for this last piece here, I can Control left click to select all 3 of these, Control D, duplicate all 3 at once, Control drag it out. There we go. I now have a nice little 3x3 grid for this to take place on. So now that I have something for this to take place on, let's put down my characters. So I'm going to go into characters here. And as adorable as the beans are, they also can't be animated with like running animations because they're beans. So we are going to use the character female and the character male options here. Now, which one you want to specify as the enemy and which one that you want to specify as the player, it's totally up to you. I am going to use the player as the female character. And the enemy as the male character. So I'm going to place them on opposite sides. Now, why do I want to place them on opposite sides? Well, I don't want the enemy and the player to be too close to one another, simply because I don't want the enemy to instantly detect the player. I want to be able to move within sight. I want to be able to test, am I so far away that I cannot be seen, or am I close enough that I can be seen? So I want to make sure I maintain that. Now I also want to put in my goal, which is the chicken. So I am going to go into the mesh tent free chicken. And I'm going to go into prefabs, and there he is. There's the toon chicken. Now the toon chicken I'm going to put fairly close to the player and well away from the enemy. Again, why? Well, when I go to test the victory condition, I'm not concerned about testing whether or not the computer is going to be chasing after me or catching me or anything else like that. I just want to test, all right, if I walk over and I run into the chicken, do I win? That's it. That's all I need to test. So I'm going to want that chicken really close by so that it's really quick and easy for me to test that. Now, there's one final thing that I want to do for setting up this test level, and that is I'm going to want a barrier here, because not only do I need to be able to test, am I so far away that the enemy can't see me, and am I close enough that the enemy can see me, but I also want to be able to test, am I close enough for the enemy to be able to see me, but there's an obstacle in the way that should prevent the enemy from seeing me. So I'm going to go back to the polygon starter, go back to the prefabs, and what I am going to use, the best thing I have found is this block. Now, it is a 1x1 block, not ideal. However, it's also a very scalable block. So I can plonk this guy down. Let's go ahead and keep him on the grid. Whoops, that's not at all what I meant to do. There we go. 0, 0, and 5. Looks good. And what I can do is I'm going to change the scale on the X to 5. There you go. Make it perfectly centered on the block there. And then I'm going to scale it on the Y by 3. So the location for this block is 505. Well, I don't know, maybe move it 7. A little bit, sort of splitting the difference there. So 507 for my wall, 531 for my scale, so that I have a nice, big, massive wall that will block the vision cone from the enemy. So I'm going to step back, pause for a moment and think, is this all of the conditions that I need to be able to test for this game? I'm going to be able to test walking around and controlling the character. Plenty of room for me to do that without running into risk of detection, as long as I don't make the detection radius stupidly huge. I have the chicken very close by for being able to properly detect if the player has won the game. I have an enemy that will be able to test, and the enemy's far enough away, I can test, I am so far away, the enemy should not be able to see me. I can get close, so that way I can test to make sure the enemy can see me. And there's something that I haven't accounted for, and that is obstacle. I want to make sure that if the enemy can see me, the enemy can navigate around an obstacle to reach me. So I'm going to want to make sure that I have that. Again, this is why, a test level takes a little bit more thought than you might think initially. So I'm going to grab another one of these blocks. Actually, you know what? Let's turn my snap settings down to 1. So I'm going to grab a block. I'm going to duplicate said block. There we go. Rotate it. And again, I'm going to use the control drag so that I snap in 15-degree increments. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sink this down. So it's jutting down like that. I could also modify the scale value, but you know what? This is going to get me exactly what I want. So I should be able to, and you know what? Let's just make sure this is close enough and that I can. All right, that should be more than enough room to get through. And gives me the ability to get up close to this wall, have the enemy detect me, navigate around it, and catch me. So, too far away. I can come over here to test close enough. Can come up against the wall to test close, but there's something between me and the enemy, so I should not be chased. And I have this shorter wall over here that, again, I can walk around the edge to approach it to make sure that I am testing obstacle avoidance for the AI. While your test level doesn't have to look exactly like this, it should be fairly close because you want to make sure that you are covering all of these angles. With that, I'm going to save my scene. And before we move on to the next video, there are a couple of housekeeping type stuff that I want to do. First, you'll probably notice that aspects of this level are super dark. Despite the fact that we're not going to be worrying about lighting whatsoever, in order for the lighting to not be completely borked, we do have to generate our lighting at least once in order for shadows not to be super dark. So in order to do that, we are going to have to bring up the lighting window. So I'm going to go to Window, I'm going to go to Rendering, and I'm going to go to lighting. I will typically almost always keep this window docked over here with hierarchy, because practically every level that you create is going to be able to benefit from clicking on the generate lighting button at least once. So I'm going to click on that and let my lighting calculate here real fast. And you can see, bam, it just instantly brightened up the whole scene, and I don't have super black, dark shadows on areas. Do keep in mind that your scene has to be saved before you're allowed to generate lighting information. The other housekeeping type of thing that I'm going to do is I want to place all of my level tiles into a collection game object. Is this necessary? No, but it's also very useful. So I am going to create a new game object. I used Control-Shift-N. It's a very useful keyboard shortcut. I call it underscore tiles. Once more, as in previous videos, that underscore is a personal naming convention. When I am using a game object as a quasi folder to organize my scene, and there is absolutely no other purpose to the game object besides acting as a folder, I put an underscore in front of it to let me know that that's what this purpose is. I'm going to reset its transform. Even though it is not strictly necessary, it's very good practice. And then I'm going to take all of my floor tiles, and I am going to make sure that I have my wall tiles in there as well. And then just to double check, I'm going to select my tiles game object here. I'm going to disable it. Yep, okay, that made my entire level go away except for the 2 characters and my chicken goal. Turn those back on. Save. And I am good to go. Make sure that you got a good test level set up with a player, an enemy, a chicken, the ability to block line of sight, and the ability for the AI to navigate around an obstacle. And then move on to the next video. Until next time.